Perhaps Queen Victoria remains one of the most respected and adored rulers. For more than half a century, she has been a symbol of her country, its customs and values. Her name has become synonymous for an entire era and has become an important tradition in itself, without which England would not be what it is. Even after many decades, the British nostalgically recall the times of the Victorian era, when life followed strict rules and did not bring unpleasant surprises in the future. Back then, gentlemen were considered real gentlemen, taking seats in the House of Lords, while criminals served their sentences in prison. To win an impeccable reputation was more valuable than any wealth, and it instantly opened many doors to its owners. There were few policemen on the streets, but each of them sincerely served the law. The monarchy enjoyed universal respect, but the real policy was formed in Parliament and in elections, and patriotism was not imposed by force. Politeness and restraint were considered great virtues. It was truly a golden time for Britain. Despite the absence of major military, political, or personal victories, Queen Victoria has always lived up to her name by winning the hearts of her fellow citizens. However, her long life was not without difficulties. The Emperor's goddaughter is the salvation of the British crown. The events began with rather gloomy premises. By the brief end of the first third of the 19th century, the Hanoverian dynasty, which ruled the country, was a rather depressing sight. Mental disorder, apathy, alcoholism, carelessness, and moral decay were all visible signs of the degradation of the dynasty. Only the most extreme patriots could ignore this. Victoria's grandfather, King George III, even ended up in a psychiatric hospital by the end of his life, and among his many children, only two were able to briefly claim the crown. All the other members of the royal family, the descendants of this mad king, for various reasons were unable to govern the state, and so fate arranged that in 1837 his granddaughter appeared on the throne, the 18-year-old daughter of Edward, Prince of Kent, and Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg. The future queen was named Alexandrina Victoria after her mother and her godfather, the Russian Emperor Alexander I, by her birth name. The simple childhood of the upcoming queen. The little princess was born on May 24, 1819, strong and healthy, which was an unusual phenomenon in this degenerate dynasty. But Victoria's childhood was far from carefree. She did not remember her father, who passed away from pneumonia when she was barely a year old, leaving her family with a lot of debts. Since childhood, the future queen received a new dress only when she grew out of the old one. Throughout her later life, she showed a modesty rare for her high position in choosing outfits and criticized other women for their penchant for luxury and constant change of clothes. The education that Victoria received at home included the study of foreign languages, arithmetic, geography, music, horse riding, and drawing. However, it was only when she turned 12 that she found out about her destiny. It turned out that all these years her mother secretly prepared her for the future role of the Queen of Great Britain. During this period, she was also explained that the crown carries not only power, but also a huge responsibility. Even in small things, an extensive list of prohibitions and restrictions in the daily life of the monarch was a tradition of Old England. The Queen was forbidden to meet strangers, show feelings in public, freely change her daily routine, and even enjoy sweets at will. Signs of misfortune during Victoria's coronation. On June 20, 1837, a tragic event occurred. King William IV, who was Victoria's uncle, died. Her age is only 18 years old. She ascended the throne, realizing that now her main priority is the fulfillment of monarchical duties. The coronation was not without incidents, including whispers and confusion with the size of the royal ring, which many considered ominous signs. In general, the British were not optimistic about the long and successful reign of the new queen because they were worried about her heredity. Decisive actions of young Victoria. Nevertheless, the new queen immediately took decisive steps in politics, calming the anxiety among her subjects. First of all, she announced to her mother that she no longer needed her daily care and was going to perform royal duties on her own as an adult. Then, with the same resolute and unyielding spirit, she addressed the Parliament. Since childhood, Victoria was brought up in respect for the law, which established that in England, the monarch does not make independent political decisions, but only approves the decisions of the cabinet of ministers. However, this did not cancel her right to be aware of all the details that she signs with her royal signature. Therefore, already in her first messages to the government, the young queen clearly made it clear that ministers who hide information from her or deliberately mislead her risk losing their posts. I couldn't wait to get married. 20-year-old Victoria was worried about the obligation to live with her mother in the same palace, as was customary for unmarried girls of that time. Fortunately for the young queen, she showed interest in her cousin, the attractive Duke Albert. In her diary, she described him as a man with good teeth and a beautiful nose. Without hesitation, Victoria invited the Duke to visit, and just 5 days after his arrival in Windsor, made him an offer. In this case, Victoria did not break the tradition, as the British queens themselves offer marriage to their chosen ones, happiness in the family like kings. On the evening after the wedding on February 10, 1840, Victoria shared her feelings in her diary. My dear, dear, dear Albert, his deep love and devotion filled me with a feeling of heavenly attraction and happiness that I had never hoped to experience before. He hugged me, and we exchanged kisses over and over again. His beauty, his tenderness and kindness. How can I ever adequately respond to such love? It was the most joyful day of my life. Victoria and Albert really fell in love with each other and created an exemplary royal family. It was something that the British could not even dream of from their monarchs. No scandals, no treason, nothing that could affect the high position of the first family in the empire. At first, people doubted how happy Albert was. Even the most loyal supporters of the monarchy could not but admit that the Queen's appearance was not favored by nature. All her life, she struggled in vain with excess weight, which was reinforced by low growth, and her appearance, by all accounts, was never considered a classic beauty. Her natural qualities included intelligence, a calm character, a rare directness for a monarch, although sometimes it turned into straightforwardness, and good manners. On the other hand, Albert was handsome, physically fit, and had a broad education in various fields, including knowledge of technology, painting, and architecture. Even their musical preferences differed. Victoria preferred operetta and dancing until morning, while Albert was fond of classical music and bored at palace balls. However, this did not prevent them from creating a happy marriage. A mother of many children, and at the same time a queen. Exactly 9 months after the marriage, the royal couple had a daughter, Victoria, and then a son, the future King Edward VII, and 7 children afterwards. However, Victoria was not going to devote herself entirely to her family and home. She gradually involved her husband in state affairs, although Albert initially treated this coolly. In order to increase Albert's social status, the Queen obtained from Parliament the constitutional consolidation of the title of Prince Consort of the Queen, for her husband. Over time, Albert's influence on the Queen in all areas, including state affairs, became decisive. Victoria did not resist this, although earlier she ironically noticed that she had to read and sign documents, and her husband could only get them wet. Now Albert has become for her not only a life partner and a close person, but also her main and most reliable advisor. The tragedy of Victoria. It lasted exactly 20 years, and suddenly everything collapsed overnight. At the age of 42, Albert unexpectedly died of typhoid fever, and Victoria was left alone, twice alone as a woman and as a queen. She was unable to fully recover from this loss during the remaining 40 years of her long life. In the beginning, after the death of her husband, Victoria went into apathy and voluntarily isolated herself from the world, not wanting to communicate with anyone, not appearing at official events, and withdrawing from public affairs. Many feared that the Queen, like her grandfather, might lose her mind. The ruler's favorite companion, and here an event occurred about which there is still no complete clarity. Next to the sad and fading widow, a man appeared who returned the joy of life to the ruler and breathed new energy into the kingdom. This man was John Brown, a longtime employee of the royal family, a simple Scot by birth. The details of their relationship remain a secret. There were various rumors up to claims that the Queen, a symbol of morality in the era that became a name in her honor, entered into a secret marriage with her servant. John Brown became a reliable and sincere friend for the Queen, without showing those traits that usually accompany favorites. He did not seek profit, did not pursue material benefits, lands, or titles, and did not interfere in politics. Despite the arrogance and high moral standards, at least in public, at that time, England forgave her queen for this unusual friendly attitude towards an ordinary servant. Victoria's successes in the field of politics. During this period, which can be called an entire epoch, the British Empire continuously strengthened its influence and power. Both Queen Victoria herself, who proved herself to be a resolute and pragmatic politician, and those who practically implemented this policy, in particular the famous English Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, played a role in this strengthening. Thanks to their joint efforts, Great Britain entered the 20th century as one of the leading world powers, acquiring important territories, including rich India and South Africa, as well as control over the lucrative Suez Canal. An unworthy achievement of the British Crown. The first cracks in this colonial fortress appeared during the reign of Victoria. The sad result was fighting with South African Boers and conflicts related to opium in China. In the first case, the vaunted British gentleman destroyed the European population and Christianity, introducing such achievements as a concentration camp and barbed wire. In the second case, these same gentlemen asserted their civilized right to narcotic opium, influencing the nation. In addition, Ireland continued to violate Victoria's peace. 6 attempts on her life were made by the Irish, and India also rose in revolt. But, in general, the Victorian era will remain in the history of England a time of victories and glory. And the mother of the nation has flaws. At that time, the Queen continued to act as the mother of the nation. She often appeared in society with her extended family and sought to maintain an image of perfection and predictability. She followed the laws very vigilantly, avoided scandals in the palace, and did not show cunning and hypocrisy. In short, Victoria did everything possible to ensure peace and stability in the lives of her subjects and to avoid any shocks, unpleasant surprises, and financial crises. Nevertheless, over the years, stability began to give way to stagnation, and the Victorian morality imposed by the Queen turned into excessive hypocrisy and hypocrisy. Her character was also changing for the worse. She increasingly became picky about her surroundings, whether they were members of the government or even her own children. Typical avarice of an elderly man became inherent in her, manifested, in particular, in her unwillingness to give up the throne in favor of her son. Edward ascended the throne closer to the age of 70. Does all this remind you of something familiar in some way? The last wishes of Queen Victoria. The end of the Victorian era was the 20th century. In the last year of this century, celebrating the anniversary of her husband's death, Queen Victoria seemed to have decided that it was time for her to join him in the other world. She planned her own funeral ceremony in detail, which became an example for future rulers such as Winston Churchill. The Queen firmly decided to retire from life on the Isle of Wight, and eventually she passed away on January 22, 1901. England took this mourning news as news of the end of the world. Victoria ruled for so long, and under her rule life became so stable and predictable that many seriously believed that it would be forever.